little bit of the light, saw what the light was doing, and then get some direct light. When the light hits earlier, the light had light, nice flat light. How the light, waiting for the light, beautiful soft light. The light is very flat, nice soft light. I think there'd be very few of us here that would argue that it's the pursuit of light that draws us into the landscape as landscape photographers. There's nothing quite like having that burning sky in front of you, or as the sun comes out of the cloud and pierces and hits that subject, that illuminates everything that you kind of wished for when you set up that composition. And so it's those moments that bring us back out into the landscape and really trying to chase that next high, that next moment. And so, at least for me, light really is what brings me back out again and again and again. And I talked about this a few weeks ago in my composition video on landscape photography. But light is, if not the most important, one of the most important parts of your landscape photo. It creates depth, it creates interest for the viewer, it helps them to move through your photograph in a way that a photo without light just can't do. So light can really help accentuate the features that you want to be shown in your photo. Now, if you're like me, early on you were told that the best light, the light you had to go after, happened at sunrise and at sunset, maybe in half an hour on either side of those times, where the skies were full of epic colors and the sun was nice and soft and created that nice glow. And so if you're like me, you went out at those times and you chased that light, you chased that epic color. And so I would go out and I would put something in the foreground and I'd put a burning sky behind it. And for me, that was landscape photography. And I would chase that next high. I would go every single golden hour to try and get something better. The problem is, better when you're composing formulaic photos that are very, restrictive, and you have a foreground element in the sky. The only way that those photos can get better is if you get a more interesting foreground object or a more interesting sky. So there's nothing that really changes in the composition that's going to improve your landscape photography or make it more your own. And so it was about a year of this, and I had someone ask me when I was going to stop taking the same photos again and again and again. And I wasn't really sure how to respond to this at the time. It wasn't until a few months later that I started taking my camera out at times that I was told there wasn't a good light then. And I made a lot of bad pictures for a very, very long time. I still make bad pictures. But it was then that I began to move towards a more freedom of my own expression. And I began to take pictures that really meant a lot to me. And they weren't a rinse and repeat of everything that I had done until that day. And so I think understanding the different kinds of light and how it can shape the landscape and what kind of photos you can take during different times of the day really can only help you be more free to express what you want to express in your photography. So lately, I'd have to say my favorite kind of light is flat light. And this happens when the sun is already up in the sky and is covered by clouds. So this could be kind of flat, like really flat light where there is no dimension, there's no shadow, there's no highlights, it's really flat. So this is usually when there's a really heavy bank of clouds, or those low-lying clouds, maybe they're full of rain or that kind of thing, that are blocking the sun. And so the sun really has not enough strength to pierce through those clouds at all, and the scenes are very flat. And so you see there's a couple examples here where those scenes, they have no depth. Any depth that was there in these photos has been created through post-processing. So that's one type of flat light. Another kind of flat light is directional flat light. And so this is when there is those medium to high altitude clouds that are blocking the sun. So in both of these situations, you do need clouds in the sky, and the sun is already up in the sky, but it's a different kind of clouds that kind of give you some of those dimensions that or dimensionality that you do need to create depth in your photo. So if it's a cloudy day and the clouds are low and they're kind of low hanging and flat, I'm looking for more abstract scenes that don't need light. If it's directional, then that light has some shape to it, and I can actually use it to create images that have depth. And so I want to talk about a couple of reasons I really enjoy this light. First is just it's simply a better time to get out and shoot. I don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning to go for a sunrise shoot. I don't have to stay out till 11 at night to, you know, wait for the sunset colors to stop and then get home. And then, you know, so it's, you're not talking about the tail end of the day. You're talking about the middle of the day when you can get out for a few hours and just take your time exploring. And that leads to another kind of time reason. I do not do this full time. I head out whenever I get a chance to. And so usually for me, that's in the middle of the day. With young family, it's hard to get out in the evenings just with everyone's schedules. And then in the morning, it's really hard to get out of the house when you have other things going on. So for me, the middle of the day is a good time for me to go out and take pictures. So I need to adapt to the kind of light that works for my schedule. And so in this case, flat light is something that I really enjoy, just because it's a time that I'm able to take with myself and get out into the nature and into the landscape to enjoy photography. A second reason besides time that I really enjoy shooting in flat light is it does lead to a more contemplative approach. It's much slower. And so that can really foster creativity. I'm not typically, you know, looking at a big vista where I have to include these really dramatic elements, and then because at that point I'm including the sky in my photo when I'm in these places. So I'm not usually in those places. Usually I'm walking in a forest, or I'm wandering on the creek edge, you know, I'm looking down at the forest floor, or, you know, I'm looking for waterfalls, those kind of things. I'm not typically looking for those kind of grand sweeping photographs. And so in this light, usually it's a much slower approach. Even though the light moves much slower, sun's already up, so it's not going to get worse as the day progresses. As long as the clouds remain in the sky, the light is going to be very consistent. It's just going to move around a little bit. So you have, you know, several hours to try and find something, so you can take your time and you can really work those compositions. And this kind of is in stark contrast to what happens at sunrise. At least in Canada, you know, you have 3, 4, 5 minutes in the summertime before that sun just goes straight down and your color is gone. So we're talking the difference between hours and minutes when we talk about this kind of light. And so for me, I really enjoy that because I'm able to actually explore different areas, get to know them, and then I can kind of make photographs slowly where I kind of pick areas and little things that I like. And so I do find that a telephoto lens is really handy in this kind of light, kind of anywhere between, like typically I use a 70-200, but even the 24-70 is really nice in some of these forests to kind of get you a nice little vignette of that scene. And you're not really focused on the wide scene. You're trying to pick up parts that really speak to you. And so that's where the creativity kind of gets fostered, is you're really looking for things that you aren't looking for normally. You're not the big vista. You're not taking a picture that someone else is going to look and say, hey, that's really dramatic. I can go to this spot and take that picture. You're in the middle of a forest that maybe no one else will ever walk by this, you know, this tree and see it the same way that you have ever again. And so this is where you're able to make up photos that maybe no one else has seen before. And so it really helps you kind of get out of that mindset of, you know, rinse, wash, repeat, and kind of helps you to move into a more creative space where you can take photos that really speak to you and can help tell a little bit of your story. A second kind of light that I'd like to look for is direct light. And this is essentially when the sun is in the sky. It can either be gold hour, like as soon as it crests the horizon, or higher in the sky in the middle of the day. But it's when the sun is directly impacting your scene. So it's when the sun is hitting some sort of element in your photograph. It's got to be from the side, so side lighting. So when the sun is, when you're facing, say, north and the sun is rising in the east, that sun is going to impact your scene from the side. The other way is backlighting, and so that's when you're shooting directly into the sun. And so that's where maybe some of your subjects or elements are dark to look at, but that light is streaming in directly from in front of your lens. And so the viewer is automatically drawn towards the brighter part of your photo, which hopefully is the center of that frame. And so you can use direct light to really make an impact with your viewer onto what the subject is. Typically when I'm planning for this kind of light, I'm looking for when that light is going to hit my subject. So take a mountain scene, for example. I'm not after a scene like this where the sun is behind the mountain and you get nice color in the sky, but the rest of the photo is really kind of dark, drab, and there's not a lot of life in it. When you contrast that with this photo where the sun is hitting that peak and is creating a lot of depth in the scene, you can see the difference between this one here without light and this one with light. It's a big difference that just planning for where that light's going to hit will make on your photos. It does give the viewer something to move towards. Again, the viewer will move to the brightest part of the scene, and if that is kind of around your subject or the light is hitting your subject in a good way, then that is an ideal way of using direct light. Or you could use it in terms of layers, and so you can add depth in your scene by letting it hit one of those layers. And so if it's you're using a telephoto, for example, and the light is doing something interesting in just one layer but none of the other ones, then it separates that layer from the others and gives the viewer a landing point. So unlike flat light and direct light, reflected light is very straightforward. There aren't any kind of subcategories under it. It's simply when light is bounced off of different elements and absorbed by other ones. And so again, it's not direct light. There's no light hitting that element exactly. It's bouncing off of one and then being absorbed by this one. And it's not flat because the sun does need to be in the sky and shining for that to actually happen. If you consider maybe a studio photography, you have a reflector where a light is bounced off that reflector and then it's bounced, and it's usually used to soften shadows on a subject. And so the same sort of thing happens in landscapes, is the sun will bounce off of different things and then kind of help lift those shadows. And you see that a lot in the winter, especially with snow. Snow is white in nature, and so it's going to bounce a lot of light around. So that's why we see there's very, very few times will you ever see, outside of like when there is no light at all, you won't see a lot of deep, harsh shadows. So that's why I really enjoy shooting in winter, is the light is usually much softer. And that's just because that light is bouncing around so much that there is no possibility for any of those shadows to get too dark. The other benefit in the landscape, as opposed to, say, the studio where you're bouncing that white light off, there's a lot of different contrast and color with these kind of light. And so the snow or the frost or in a winter scene is going to absorb whatever color that light is. So if you take this one, for example, this snow is receiving direct light from the sun. It's very golden color, but you'll see that the snow in the shadow is blue. That's because it's reflecting that ambient light from the sky, and it's being absorbed by that snow. So anything in shade in the wintertime is going to be blue in tone. So it does give you a beautiful contrast when you have that warm sun coming up and that that cool tones in the shadow. So you're going to have that beautiful contrast in color all the time in the winter, which is another reason why winter is a fantastic time for landscape photography. Now, it doesn't have to be snow. Take this clay photo, for example. This was taken, it's a picture of white clay, but it's not white because it's absorbing the colors of the sunset. And so while the sky was busy burning away, I pointed the camera down and took a picture of the clay. And so that's why you see pinks and purples and even some blues in there, because that was the color of the sunset. And so that clay was simply reflecting what light was happening in the sky, and it was absorbing those colors and giving me, something that was much, much different than, just planting my wide angle lens down and pointing at something with a burning sky in the background. So pay attention to what light is doing in the landscape. Watch it, understand it, begin to be a student of it. Look at what flat light is doing. Watch direct light as it hits the subject, and kind of look at the different colors that reflected light can give you, so that you can begin to take pictures that are more your own. The one word of caution I would give you is to watch what light is doing in your composition. So once you've answered that question, why do I want to take this photograph? And you have a subject, make sure the light is not fighting against that subject, that the light is working with it to accentuate it so the viewer really knows what that photo is about. It's easy to take a picture of light and without a subject. I've done that many times. Here's an example. But allowing light to really accentuate what you want that photo to be about is only going to help your photograph. If, for example, your subject is on the right, but that light is happening on the left, then the viewer is going to look at the light first, and they're not going to understand what the point of the photo is. So make sure that that subject is benefited by your use of light. And so whether that means coming back on a different day or moving yourself so that the light is actually interacting with your subject the way you want it to, but beginning to understand what light is doing is only going to help your photographs. So, and I hope this helps you to become more creative and to really kind of help your photograph become more personal to you. And so if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more like this. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.